This programme was produced at and first aired on MPR, Manawatu People's Radio, with support from New Zealand On Air. Ka pai Irarangi Tamotu, MPR.
Kia ora and welcome to Reserved Recommendations, a show about problematic faves, great trash, difficult art, and our complex relationship with art and entertainment. My name's Hugh, I'm the host, and I'd like to put in a very mild content warning for this show as a whole. Sometimes our recommendations on this show are reserved just because the thing that we're discussing is in some way not good. But sometimes there are aspects to the art or artist that may be confronting for some people. Read the episode descriptions for more information, and do be aware of your listening environment. Hello and welcome to another edition of Reserved Recommendations. This is either the second or the third show. The reason I keep being uncertain about exactly where shows fall is because as this is a peek behind the curtain for y'all, we record these things in batches as and when people are available, and as a result, the scheduling doesn't necessarily line up with the recording order. However, it gives me great pleasure to introduce my brother, Angus Dingwall, all the way from sunny Glasgow.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going all right. Yeah. It's not quite sunny right here. It's dark for me, while it must be shining and bright in the morning for you. But we soldier on.
Yeah. No, it's behaving as well as it does in autumn in Palmerston North right now. It's doing that thing where I imagine if I were outside, it would be crisp, but it is blue skied and all of those nice things. All right. Well, I'm not just talking to you because you're my brother, because we have enough excuses to talk just for that reason. Today, the thing that you wanted to kind of reservedly pitch the world on was a duo called the Two Gallants. Now, the extent of my research is I had a skim of the Wikipedia article, so I can tell people that they're a duo from San Francisco, and I allowed Spotify to suggest me Two Gallants songs at random. What would you say as the initial draw? Why should people listen to this band, and what kind of thing are they?
So this is kind of why they ended up being my choice for this particular thing, and this kind of it plays into the second part of the podcast. That I think they're very good, but I can't imagine the conversation I had with somebody, which ended up with me going, you know what you should really listen to? The Two Gallants. But they are fantastic storytellers, and they are really cacophonic, but in a nice way. They make a lot of noise for being a duo of one guy on guitar and one guy on drums. Which is a kind of unique duo, as it were.
Yeah, and I mean, the loud duo thing is a known pre-existing genre. People would think of bands like White Stripes or Royal Blood, but in those cases, the instruments are really heavily distorted to the point where they become very
walls of noise, or just kind of
they become walls of noise, and they also become, there's an effect where as you add distortion, your sound becomes more and more compressed because of the way that distortion works. Basically, it because distortion turns signal over a certain loudness into distorted signal, throwing more loudness at it creates more distortion, not more loudness.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And what that means is that Jack White's guitar, it tends to go at a pretty constant level, which I guess is a more nerdy way of saying a wall of noise.
Well, I mean,
but same for the guys base and royal blood.
We both lived through the period in our hometowns music scene where the bands would get up, tuning their instruments, introduce their act, and then turn around to feed back to their own amps. And certainly with White Stripes and other duos of the sort, that tends to be the modus operandi, right?
Yeah, it does. And the thing that I was kind of taking a long way round to talking about with the Two Gallants is that the songs I listened to, there is a use of distortion there, and there is heavy drumming, but the distortion is much more jangly and transparent, which means that it's simultaneously kind of folkier, but also in some ways more aggressive because there's much more emphasis that can be placed through the way that the instrument's kind of attacked.
Yeah, and like I must admit as well, like I have on my second screen here the Wikipedia article for the Two Gallants up, so I am also skim reading this as I talk. But there is in that a kind of talk about them discovering blues and also having quite heavy grunge influences. And there is, to a certain extent, the sound is that of the drummer playing for a grunge band while the guitarist desperately tries to play somewhere between fingerpicking for blues or country while trying to sing in the midpoint between those two parts.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a particular point of my own musical taste where you've landed on, and this is probably going to get at the end of this to me pitching you a band in case you haven't heard of them, because I can certainly think of a couple of, like, if you dig the Two Gallants, check out this person type recommendations, but we might save that for the end of the show. There's certainly a thing that I've spent probably too much of my life being deeply enamored with, which is like just painful, blistering earnestness from a singer. I'm thinking of like peak kind of 1981 first album Violent Femmes, Gordon Gano kind of stuff. And the Two Gallants aren't, they're not quite that like poor little white boy, look at me, I'm being picked on thing that Gordon Gano projects. But, there's a lot of raw nerve that goes on with those guys, it feels like.
And again, yeah, this is it's one of those things where like we're again kind of showing why this is reservation. These guys are kind of in my list of like my top songs about domestic abuse and like slavery in the South. And they do that in a really authentic and really punchy way, like The Throws from the album The Throws, which is a song about just a really horrifyingly abusive relationship, really just gets you right in that kind of feeling spot. And that is really raw and honest and feels authentic. And that's really one of the reasons why I fell in love with them.
So, I mean, I guess you're skim reading the Wikipedia article, but you've obviously been following these guys for longer than I have. I remember you mentioning them to me a long time ago, but such is life that I don't always check these things out. So I was kind of coming to them pretty fresh. But how long have you been enamored with these guys, and what have you been, kind of what are you able to detect about the journey that they've been on?
So, I mean, the story of how I found these guys is, of course, quite interesting, and of course ties into our family legacy that our father Richard, for a while, reviewed CDs for our local paper, the ODT. And he was in a strange spot, it seemed. Like they already had a classical reviewer and a rock and roll reviewer, and basically any CD that didn't fall into one of those two camps got sent to our father. So we got a lot of things like the Two Gallants, and also of note things like the legendary Shack Shakers, if for people who are interested in psychobilly.
Yeah, the legendary Shack Shakers are another band where I guess I would say, you know, if you dig the Two Gallants, check out the legendary Shack Shakers. They are much more of a good time band, but they are also shrieking weirdos, and if that's your thing, then you'll dig them.
Yeah, entirely. So in many ways, I discovered these guys because a CD turned up in the house in which I was living at the time, and being curious about, and forever curious about music, I kind of put it on, and it's one of those weird things. Like if I was going to sell somebody on the Two Gallants, the first track from the album, I'm going to get it wrong, so I'm going to check it quite now. Sorry, yeah, from their album, What the Toll Tells, Las Cruces Jail, is this uncharacteristically upbeat and kind of almost straight country song, but it really goes. And that pulled me in to listening to the rest of that album. And I got to the end of it and I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about this. And so I listened to it again and I was like, I'm still not sure how I feel about this.
I think that's a thing that we've perhaps lost a little bit with the kind of demise of physical media. Because I discovered a lot of music similarly through working at first the radio station in Dunedin, Hills AM as was then, and Otago Access Radio as is now, and then through working at the station where I currently work, because although physical media is pretty dead, people continued sending CDs to radio stations for much longer than they bothered trying to sell them anywhere other than live shows. Yeah. And so you would end up with your station owning this enormous bank of CDs, and 90% of it is crap, but as per Sturgeon's law, 90% of everything is crap. So you just kind of take a chance on something that looks interesting and you find all kinds of amazing stuff. And being a reviewer or having a dad who has a large record and CD and at one point tape collection, as we did, that would be your other way into that. And I wonder if that's a thing that happens less now that people rely more on recommendation algorithms. Yeah,
I mean, that's definitely what I've kind of ended up with. I'm kind of missing. I do remember the days where Echo Records, may it rest in peace, in Dunedin had it had some flood or its roof fell in or something, and a whole bunch of CDs just got water damaged. So for a long time, they had a table that had CDs on it for like £5. And being a young person with not a lot of money, wandering in and buying a CD that had a cool name or cool album cover for £5 was a really interesting way to learn music, learn about new bands. And I don't think any band has really stuck with me from those, but I do remember one called the Life-Size Play-Doh Monsters, which were like worth listening to. Like they were at least interesting.
Well, I've actually got one of your Echo Records CD purchases still. I've just been going through and digitizing all of my CDs because I don't have shelf space to have them like up somewhere where I can play them. So I'm going to, keep a small number that are precious for various reasons and donate the rest once I'm allowed to donate things to places again. But I found your copy of A Slow Note from a Sinking Ship by a one-man band called Portastatic, which again is it's an odd cover, and it's pretty cool lo-fi indie rock. It's kind of neat.
See, you say these things, and I have no memory of ever buying or owning the CD, but that sounds entirely like something that I probably did buy and it probably did own at a time.
Yeah, I suspect I pinched it from you quite early in its life cycle, which is probably why you forgot it.
Yeah.
So, shall we play a track of the Two Gallants now to give people a taste of what's going on, and maybe pick that one that you mentioned, which, as you say, is uncharacteristic, but maybe we ease people in. So that was called Las Cruces Jail?
So this is Las Cruces Jail, and yeah, no, it is it does show the sort of cacophony and madness of their sound, but is, I guess, slightly more accessible than a lot of their other tracks, and I think shorter in many ways, so that may also help.
Well, I spent last night in Las Cruces Jail, rain and hail, born to fail. Nobody come but I go my bail. Son, don't you rise no more. I shot one man on the county line, took his time and I blew his mind, and I'm just sitting here doing time. Son, don't you rise no more. Well, a restless wind is whistling through my window, through my head, through all the straits that I've survived. And in my hour of darkness, I keep counsel with the dead, just enough to remind me I'm alive. Well, I write to the governor for to hear my plea, but he don't even answer me. Judge said he's gonna set my spirit free, so don't you rise no more. Gavel fell, he chose the day, gallows high, 13th of May, but I don't plan to go that way, so don't you rise no more. Good night, my Andalusia. Don't buy all the lies that they feed you. And though you're heading slowly to some place I can't respect, I'll keep you in my collection of regrets. And that's 21 fell by my gun. Oh, they all fell the same. Just need one more to match my age. Then I'll count my killing done, but I won't deny my name. The quickest wrist of the chaperone sage. Well, desperate times come from desperate men. I'm just a kid, but I'll pretend my time will come, but until then, son, don't you rise no more. I see the gallows altar that circle round the sun. They're gonna hang me if I stay here, and they'll shoot me if I run. Jailer better watch his pride, or on my wrist these shackles slide. In my restless 45, so don't you rise no more. Good night, my Andalusia. Don't buy all the lies that they feed you. And though you're heading slowly to some place I can't respect, I'll keep you in my collection of regrets. Down the highway, down the road, to infamy I'll ride. I'll take my pardon on the run, with a trail of death behind me and Delafina at my side. Two silhouettes against the sun. Well, I spent last night in Las Cruces jail, rain and hail, born to fail. Nobody come wanna go my bail, so don't you rise no more.
And we're back. That was Las Cruces Jail from, what did you say the name of the album was?
What the Toll Tells.
What the Toll Tells by the Two Gallants. And I am speaking today with my brother Angus Dingwall live from sunny Glasgow, where it is for him actually getting on in the evening, and so not even remotely sunny, even if the weather's good. So that was the first track of, I don't know if it's the first album, but the first album that you came across. So having discovered this band and gone, what the heck is going on here? What kept you coming back? You know, how did you end up listening to more and finding out more?
I think so. We also got the album that follows this called The Throws, and again, that was another case of listening through the album going, I'm not sure how I feel about this album, and then listening through it again and going, I'm still not sure how I feel about this album, and listening through it like a third or fourth time and going, you know, okay, I'm on track with you here. I'm with you, and then let's be honest, a lot of my music collection at that time was built by illegal downloading from Soulseek and various other clients. So
this is a conversation I had with Rob Milden when we were talking about Orteka, because that was a band that he discovered in the mid-90s, late 90s, when Napster was still a thing. And so, you know, individual track by track downloading of things and then finding out that you've actually got the MIDI sequenced version instead of the real song, and all of those unique joys and terrors which are probably unknown to the youth of today.
Indeed, right. So I have still quite a large digital music collection, even though most of the things I listen to now are on Spotify. And that a lot of that came from this process of hearing maybe one or two tracks from a band and going, that sounds really great, going to one of these online clients, downloading 2 or 3 albums, and then either listening to them going, okay, so this band had 2 or 3 good tracks and the rest of their albums are kind of okay, or kind of liking them and then storing them away. And I think that's what I did to a greater or less extent with the Two Gallants, is I got various other albums downloaded onto the hard drive of my computer, and then onto whatever MP3 player I was using at the time to date our narrators here. And and it just became like a constant thing that I returned to listen to while doing something else, right? It's one of those, when the average track length is about 8 minutes, it's something that you want to do something while you're listening to it.
That's interesting, because that's not necessarily always the case with bands that have that kind of long track length. Occasionally, in order to actually function with the music, there's a certain amount of direct attention that you need to be able to apply to it. But I guess that's a function of the musicality being quite recognizable. As I say, the kinds of distortion that they use tends to be quite transparent and jangly, so you can hear what guitar is doing quite easily. You can hear the drum quite easily. And while the voice might get more and more and more tortured, it's not being turned into a space robot, and there is a human voice saying words that you can hear.
Yeah, and I mean, I think also there's a certain degree about how I listen to music as well, where I tend to listen to music while I'm walking somewhere or playing games or doing something else. And so I think it very well fit into that space in my life of music that was good to, say, play a computer game to. If the game was becoming kind of a lot of rote work, then you could listen to the beautiful story being told by the music. And if the game was becoming stimulating, then you could pay attention to the game and not feel like you were being bombarded too much by the music.
I actually recall that habit of yours because there was the period where we owned Quake 2 and got bored of Quake 2's soundtrack reasonably quickly, and so would play Quake 2 on mute while listening to The Wall by Pink Floyd, because I guess that was the album that we were listening to at the time. And so Quake 2, for people who aren't familiar with it, is the one where they decided to try and give Quake a plot, which it never really had up to that point. And the plot is about being a space marine and all of your friends being turned into horrible robot monsters that you then have to kill. And doing that while listening to The Wall over and over and over again was a bit strange.
I mean, just while waiting for you to be ready here, I was refamiliarizing me with myself with the Two Gallants and listening to it while playing a game that would probably be also apt for this podcast called Frostpunk, in which you take over the survivors of a apocalypse and have to make terrible moral decisions while building their new society, to which the Two Gallants actually made a very good soundtrack, it must be said.
Excellent. Look, we are now at the halfway point, so we're going to need to take a brief break for some messages to pay the rent for the station. Do stick about. We will be back very, very shortly, right after this.
Support this show and others like it by giving a donation. For more information, go to www.mpr.nz/donate. If you're a fan of NPR, listening to our podcasts and live stream has never been easier. Just search for accessmedia.nz on the App Store or Google Play and download the app with the kiwi fruit logo. Once you've got it, pick Manawatu People's Radio from the list of stations and go find your new favourite show.
And we're back on Reserved Recommendations, talking today to my brother Angus, all the way from sunny Glasgow. I'm going to keep calling it sunny Glasgow, even though it's now nearly 9:30 at night for you. And we're talking today in a kind of rambling way about the Two Gallants. So we've talked a bit about the storytelling and the kind of grim themes. Do you feel like there's a sort of temperament that you maybe need to have to be able to get on board with that, or do you think that there's a way that people could approach this band that would make them more likely to get it?
There is a certain degree in which I find myself listening to very grim music. But also, I would say there is this weird kind of subgenre of music. For those people who are familiar with the podcast, now I've completely lost it. Welcome to Night Vale. If people are familiar with Welcome to Night Vale, there is a kind of subgenre of music that is music which is featured as the weather in Welcome to Night Vale. And I think probably my pitch, the only way I could probably pitch this to somebody was like, if you're kind of into the music that gets used as the musical interlude for that podcast, then try the Two Gallants. Or if you're just into like slightly grim music, that would be kind of the other way in. Also, just like people, there are lots of people who like storytelling, and as I say, like, one of the things that is really entrancing about the Two Gallants is the storytelling. Is like it's one of the things that's often said about modern music, that people don't really write ballads anymore, and it seems like the Two Gallants, to a greater or lesser degree, don't write anything other than ballads.
It's an interesting kind of storytelling as well, though, because it's not always very direct. Now, because I was listening to this on letting Spotify randomly give me Two Gallant songs while I was making dinner last night, basically, I didn't keep a really good track of titles or albums. But there's one song in particular that's coming back to me, where the chorus is about all your fields have gone rotten and your amber waves of grain.
Yeah.
And that's a really powerful mood, but it's not a storytelling song in the sense of like A Boy Named Sue.
I'm really glad you reminded me of that, because this is the other thing about that album, which I think is, again, it's what the Telltales, yep. And that's the protest song written by the Two Gallants, and it's referencing must have been George W. Bush, the Jr. So if you listen to that song, it is about a kind of it is a protest song against the second Iraq war and the way that George W. Bush went around his presidency and that things. And so it's it talks about, you talk to God and he sounds very much like you, and you're right because you talk to God. And it's a really weird protest song, but it is at base a protest song.
Yeah, and you get that, and part of the way that you get that is through, I guess, I'm just trying to think of a good way of referring to it so that people will get what I mean. I guess it would be like mutated repetition or something like that. Like the song comes around and comes around and comes around and comes around to the same refrain over and over again, but the vocal delivery and the musical performance get more and more kind of tortured and aggressive each time they return to it. And so that kind of tells the story in and of itself, even though the stuff that they're playing hasn't changed and the words that they're singing haven't changed.
Yeah, and I really think that those kind of tortured nature of the vocals is really one of the things that both pull me into the Two Gallants, and also just is one of those reasons why it's a reserved recommendation, right? Like, some of the songs are slightly stalky and creepy, about, I followed you to the party and I'm nothing to you, but delivered in such a way that you kind of empathize with this weird tortured person who is seemingly following this other person from party to party, and like hiding in the corner and drinking their drink and watching the other person be a kind of a social person.
So, I mean, that, of course, identifying with difficult and shady characters is actually a pop music staple. I mean, although sometimes inadvertently, I think Sting and the Police provided us, if not the example, then the most obvious example with a song like Every Step You Take, which was clearly intended to be one thing but came off as another. Why don't we play that song that we were just talking about, the protest song? Unfortunately, you're going to have to announce it because, as I say, I got it at random while listening to the Two Gallants on Spotify, so I have no clear idea of what it's called.
So this is Waves of Grain by the Two Gallants off the album What the Toll Tells.
Pray betray the deceased. Such an infamous freedom, such a militant peace. How dare they distrust? Do they know who we are? And your progeny's brave. That track house is waiting, pre-plucked and pre-paved to the ends of the earth. Wife, kids, and a car. But oh no, no, I see them falling. Let's all pray for rain. Let's all pray for rain. And your children are reared by panic and fear. But what when all your fields are rotting, your waves of grain, amber waves of grain, and your word is yet done, and breed us till we're all the same. Collection of tongues keep framed in your parlor with your Bibles and guns, the fetus of Christ with a fistful of scars. And your vision is clear while you blind your own kind in a curtain of fear. Your words twisted skywards, distracted by stars. But oh no, no, the sky is falling. Let's all pray for rain. Let's all pray for rain, and you'll pour out your prayers and weep 'cause you care. But what when all your fields are rotting, your waves of grain, amber waves of grain, and you hide the dead while my friends had to die in your name.
That was the two talents, the Two Gallants, with Waves of Grain from What the Toll Tells. I can say words and remember them. You're listening to Reserved Recommendations, a show about difficult art, great trash, and our complicated relationships with art and culture. I have a question for you about the Two Gallants, which might seem like I am trying to do them down in some way, but I promise I have a point. Do you think that they would be a worse band if they were a better band? Like, they are a band where there are a lot of rough edges performance-wise. They are not doing conventionally good singing. They are not virtuosic players. Would they be a worse band if they were a better band in those ways?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and yes, I think part of what carries them as a band and part of what gives them that I can also say words. We both spent a long time training to say words. What also gives them that authenticity to for instance, there's a track again on what the toll tells called "The Long Summer Day," which is about a black slave deciding to go out and do bloody murder because he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. And from a skinny white guy singer, that could come a lot off very poorly, except for this sort of really raw and because of this raw sound. I think that is one of the key parts that allows them to make those sort of statements and write those sort of songs, and for them not to kind of fall flat or to sound twee or just exceptionally tone deaf.
Because I guess the point that I'm angling at here is that I wonder if there is a kind of aesthetic of unaestheticness that we could point at here, because you and I both also grew up listening to Bob Dylan, who famously in his rock and roll period wanted almost always the first take of everything. And the thing that he talked about was what he called the wild free sound. It was the idea that even if it wasn't technically the best idea, he wanted the first idea to be recorded. And the sense of wanting things, I guess, to sound as much like themselves in as an intensive way as possible without necessarily sounding like the best or most polished version of themselves. Again, I would point at bands like the Velvet Underground. I would point at bands like the Violent Femmes. I wonder if there is a kind of uniting aesthetic there that's in some way meaningful or useful.
Yeah, so certainly there is, like, I think, so in the same way that Billy Bragg is actually a punk act, I think the Two Gallants are in the same way related to, I think, what gets called the new bluegrass movement, which is things like Trampled by Turtles and other such bands, who are young guys who grew up both deeply steeped in bluegrass while also having listened to quite a lot of punk and grunge and those sort of musical influences. So coming to these things like bluegrass with this punk sensibility, with this the sensibility to make very raw and make very, fast and aggressive music while holding to these sort of country or bluegrass sensibilities. I think in the same way the Two Gallants are have discovered blues sensibilities, but are still stuck very close to grunge and punk and those sounds, and also the guitarist is very accomplished finger picker and is so pulling on all those styles. So there's this kind of midpoint of having been born and listened to the new music and those sensibilities while harkening back to the older styles or to traditional styles of playing.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, that's not necessarily the level of dissidence that people might think it is. I think there's a tendency to think of older styles as being somehow more refined, but you know, when blues recordings were new, those guys were punk as fuck. They were scary people who you didn't mess with. There's a guy of our mutual acquaintance, a guy called Leo Liddell, who played with Big Bill Morganfield, who is Muddy Waters' son. And he had some Muddy Waters stories passed on secondhand from Big Bill Morganfield that, whoo boy, you know, you play something wrong in Muddy's band and they'll pull over on the side of the road halfway between towns and crikey dick.
Yeah.
And so the idea that these older styles are in some way prestige styles and not associated with aggression or danger or outlawry or dangerous politics is very much a kind of modern way of looking at them.
I mean, just to digress further, because if this podcast today has been anything, it's been digressions. I mean, that seems to be a lot of what is driving the folk punk movement, especially in the US, is a kind of reclaiming of a lot of that bluegrass and acoustic American roots folk feeling to its more radical and, as you say, punk roots, right? Like Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger in their heydays were out there on picket lines and rousing rebels, right? You know, Woody Guthrie famously has this "Machine Kills Fascists" on his guitar, right? You're not doing that to make friends.
Yeah, in fact, I'm gonna go a step further, and maybe this ties things back to the Two Gallants, and also potentially finds us a place to finish, because I'm doing mental maths about song lengths because of the way that this show is constructed. So, you know, please indulge and forgive me, dear listener, if we come in a little bit short. But I'm going to posit two aesthetics here, which are not necessarily perfectly descriptive, but might go for what we're looking at. I'm going to suggest that one aesthetic is what we might call the ukulele orchestra aesthetic, which is the idea of taking popular contemporary songs and putting them in this different context, because that's in some way inherently charming or comedic, and the skill with which it's played is then kind of icing on the cake on top of that. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm thinking of like the Wellington International Ukulele Orchestra playing Africa.
Yeah, or the postmodern jukebox. That's their
Postmodern jukebox are a perfect encapsulation of this. Actually, we could even call it, rather than the ukulele orchestra, we could call it the postmodern jukebox aesthetic. And on the other side, we would have what you would call maybe the Billy Bragg or the Violent Femmes, or I guess folk punk aesthetic, where the sense that I get is that there is a song that needs to be written and performed because it's important to the player and the singer and where they're at and what they're trying to express, and they're using acoustic instruments or semi-acoustic instruments or a particular set of kind of genre vernacular, like being bluegrass or being country or blues, because those are the tools that are available to try and express what they're trying to do.
Yeah, entirely. And also, I mean, let's delve into folk punk very quickly. There is a kind of ethical imperative about using acoustic instruments which do not require power and therefore do not require the use of say fossil fuels to create the noise. But yeah, definitely there is a separation between using instruments to, hey, look, isn't it cute when we do this? And people doing, I want to put a message across, but the only tools I have at hand is this musical styling that I have learned.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. And also, I can't remember what it was that he was being interviewed for, but again, going back to our dad, he was interviewed for something or other about folk music and how he got into it, and he was saying that the sense of spontaneity was the thing that appealed to him, like the idea that these guys were just together and picked up instruments and did the thing, and that feels to me easier to convey the closer everything is to acoustic, because it feels more like something that could happen in your living room.
Yeah. And I think also, like, let's to tie that back to the Two Gallants, I think that's one of the things that come across in their music, is that they are two friends that have been friends since they were 5 years old and learned to play guitar together. And it's that, I think it's that unique sound that you get from two people who have been kind of in their own bubble, and it's not like they came to the mic going, oh, we want to be like, we want to make music like Ed Sheeran but kind of like our own. They were like, this is the music that we want to make because whatever reason, because this is we've been listening to, you know, Nirvana and Lead Belly and whatever else, and it now makes sense that we make this music.
So we are coming to the end of our time. What I'm going to do now is very shortly ask you if you've got anything that you want to pitch or plug, because you know that is the mandatory end of a podcast. But first, if people have listened to the Two Gallants tracks that we've played and they dig it, what else would you recommend? I have a specific recommendation I'm going to make to you in case you haven't heard of it, but you go first. If you dig the Two Gallants, where would you go find more things like that? What would you suggest as like playlist companions for them?
That's really interesting. I mean, there are things, it depends on what part of the Two Gallants you're interested in. I guess one of the very quick off-the-cuff recommendations would be, if you haven't heard of them, the Mountain Goats would be another place to look for that same sort of storytelling and pathos. Also, I guess I will always put a plug into AJJ for, again, a sort of folky, chaotic, but very authentic and very acidic take on the world, especially their new album called Good Luck Everybody, which is just recently released, as well, worth a listen.
Cool. So the thing that I'm going to pitch you now is, are you familiar with Tao and the Get Down, Stay Down?
No.
Right. So this is going to be another digression, but this is going to be our final digression. Do you remember me being like ridiculously into this woman called Laura Viers?
Yes, I vaguely remember this.
Right. Okay. So Laura Viers is great. Everyone should listen to Laura Viers. You'll love her. Particularly find the album called Fire Snakes. That's where you should start with Laura Viers. 100% for sure. Start there, then go anywhere you like. Particularly Fire Snakes and Carbon Glacier were the albums that I got into first. But Fire Snakes, you'll know whether you like Laura Viers or not. Anyhow, back when Pandora was briefly a thing in New Zealand, I got Pandora to recommend me music based on liking Laura Viers, and they suggested this band Tao and the Get Down, Stay Down. Now I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing that correctly, because Tao is the lead singer's name, and she is Vietnamese, I believe. She's called Tao Nguyen.
Yep.
And so my Vietnamese pronunciation is not good. But I was immediately blown away by this band, and I thought, what the heck is this? And went and did some homework. So Tao and the Get Down, Stay Down are a folk rock band also based in San Francisco. They have a lot of the raw earnestness that you get from the Two Gallants, although they're a lot more personal. For example, they released an album called A Man Amazed, A Man Alone. This is why I should do my homework in advance. Something like that. A Man Alive, that's what it's called. They released an album called A Man Alive, which is actually their most recent album, which is specifically about Tao's relationship with her father, who abandoned her family when she was very small. And so, that's like a really specific and very personal thing. But I guess the shortest way of describing the sound to you would be, imagine that the Two Gallants were fronted by a single Vietnamese woman, and that they added like jazz and electronic music to their influences. So they will occasionally do things like chop up Tao's voice and digitally blend it into a guitar so that she sings a high note, and then it goes nyet, 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 and then blends into the first notes of a guitar solo.
Cool.
If you listened to the Two Gallants and you thought, yeah, I would dig that if it was a Vietnamese woman singing about her absent dad, and also it was a bit jazzier, but still somehow as raw and rough, then check those guys out.
Cool. I will definitely do them a look up.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Angus, for joining us on Reserved Recommendations today. I got an outro that I'll play, which has got all of my assorted plugs in it. But before we do that, do you have things that you want to plug that people should check out, places that people can find you in an official capacity for useful things that you're doing? I know that you're doing some non-profit work there in Glasgow. Is there ways that you could describe that and people could maybe give you money to make it better? Plug your shit, as they say.
Okay, so I am working with a charity called Unity in a project of theirs called the Unity Social Kitchen. And because the world has been turned upside down, what we are doing currently is providing meals to vulnerable people in the community of Parkhead and some other places as well. If you are in Glasgow and or in Scotland and have some spare cash, you can find us on Facebook, and we have a fundraiser going on there. Please throw us some money. That will make us be able to buy some more food and feed some more people.
I mean, can you accept international donations? Do you have the facility for people to throw you money on the internet?
We certainly can. I guess I'm a bit hesitant because my feeling is really, if you feel like throwing us money, go find whichever charity close to you guys is supporting the vulnerable people in your community, because they will be out there and they will be desperately scrabbling for ways to make do and ways to get stuff out to the people who need it. So there will be somebody in your community right now who is doing what I'm doing, and it feels more authentic to say, go find them and give them money. But if you're in Glasgow, find us, give us money.
Great. Well, thank you very much for talking today, Angus.
Cool. You're most welcome.
You've been listening to Reserved Recommendations, a radio show and podcast from Manawatu People's Radio, Te Reo Irirangi o ngā tangata o Manawatu. The show is produced and presented by me, Hugh Dingwall, and I also composed our theme music. It's called Sack Jazz, and you can find it at wolfboy.bandcamp.com. You can find me on the internet at Objective Realty on Twitter, and you can find the show on Facebook under Reserved Recommendations. If you've got a reserved recommendation of your own, feel free to pitch it to me in either of those two places. And if you enjoyed the show, why not go ahead and recommend it to a friend? You can find past episodes at www.mpr.nz/show/reserved on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, Manawatu People's Radio is a non-profit radio station. If you enjoy this or any of their other fine audio programming, why not fling them a couple of dollars? Go to mpr.nz/donate for more information.